Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of Change Talk. Thank you for joining me. My name is Tiffany Jenkins. In case we haven't met before, I'll be um, with you for the next couple of minutes. In case you don't know what you're watching, this is Change Talk, and this is just a space where every week at Thursday, I go live to provide some commentary on a number of issues related to leadership, behavioral health, and self care. So, thank you for joining me this evening. If you are joining us from YouTube, I would ask that you just like and subscribe to the channel. That way, you can stay up to date on new videos that are posted and information that we share. Likewise, if you're following us on Facebook Live, feel free feel free to share the stream with your friends and loved ones that you think may benefit from the information that we're going to be talking about tonight. In honor of National Suicide Prevention Day, we're going to be talking about suicide and suicide prevention. So if you know a loved one who you think might benefit from this conversation, please feel free to invite them to share in this conversation this evening. If you happen to join us on the replay, that's fine too. We want to make sure that your questions and comments get seen. So just let us know that you're joining us via the replay and participate as if you were here live with us tonight. And I will make sure that I address any comments or anything that come from our replay audience. We'll get through the information, the commentary part of it. And then at the end, I will bring in any comments or questions that you guys have and make sure that I answer those as thoroughly as possible. So let's jump right in. We're going to be, like I said, talking about suicide. So in the little ticker below, you'll see the number to the National Suicide Prevention Line. Take note of that, write it down, save it, because you never know when someone may need that information. I'm going to start with just some quick statistics, and I think it's important to understand that the reason why this topic is important is because on average, now I'm not saying this happens like accurately on the dot, but when we look at the number of people who have lost their lives to suicide in the past year, it averages out to one person every 40 seconds. Now, think about that. This broadcast has been going for 4 minutes, a little over 4 minutes now. On average, if we averaged it out, that would mean that we've already lost 4 people to death by suicide. And so when you think about it in those terms, you really see that it is a public health crisis. Like, it's a really serious emergency, and we all need to be talking about it. We don't typically talk about suicide. It's not a topic that necessarily makes us warm and fuzzy, but I mean, if this many people are taking this route, then I think it's something that deserves our attention and our conversation. What was interesting to me is that in the period between 1991 and 2017, the rate of suicide attempts by African American youth increased by 73%. So this is a particular topic of interest for me because I am a mom of 2 teen boys, and I, in my practice, have majority of African American clients. And so we have to look at this as another cultural issue that presents itself. And it's something that typically we don't really like to talk about in our communities, but we need to. We're losing a whole generation of our young people, and perhaps unnecessarily so. Another statistic that I found interesting is that the largest risk group in general for death by suicide is the 18 to 25-year-old range. Think about that, 18 to 25. Think about what's going on at 18 to 25. These are young people who have just transitioned out of high school, maybe have just completed college or are in their college years. The stress that they're under is a lot. And so We have to make sure that if we have young people that we're in touch with, that we're having these very difficult conversations. It's hard, but we got to have it, right? Because it's easier to have this conversation than it is to mourn the loss of our loved one. So I like I'd like to first talk about the language that we use. If you'll notice, I didn't say anybody committed suicide, because suicide isn't a crime. You can't commit it. When I refer to someone who has completed suicide, that means they died by suicide. That's the language that we prefer to use because it has less stigma. And like I said, this is a difficult topic that we don't like to broach in the first place. So we want to make sure that we're not making the conversation more difficult than it needs to be. Also, when you think about people who are survivors, who have lost loved ones to death by suicide, it's very difficult to hear of their loved ones spoken of in the same terms as, someone who robbed a bank, who committed a crime. So we just want to be sensitive with our language. Also, I want to highlight the differences between suicidal thoughts, suicidal plans, and suicide attempts. So when we talk about people who have suicidal thoughts, there are some people who have very passive thoughts of suicide. And those passive thoughts are just, I'd be okay if I didn't wake up tomorrow. Or, maybe the world would be better if I wasn't in it. They don't necessarily have any plan. They're not intending to do anything, but those thoughts of hopelessness are still very present. We got to be concerned about them just as much as we are someone who makes an active attempt to end their own life, because if they keep talking about it and keep talking about it and there's no intervention, they might try it. Then we talk about suicidal plans. So a plan is if someone has they have the thought, and they also know how they're going to carry out those thoughts to have an attempt. We want to try and have conversations with folks around that, because if they have a plan, then they are more likely invested in seeing it through. And so we want to try and be with them and talk with them and try to encourage them that someone does care about them and someone would be concerned if they were no longer with us. Which is why it's important to talk about what Dr. Rita Walker considers the ABCs. And Dr. Rita Walker is the author of a book called The Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health. Phenomenal book that covers a number of topics, suicide being one of the first that she covers. She talks about the ABCs of suicide prevention, basically. And the first one is A, and that is assume you can help. We have a lot of reservations about talking about suicide because in some spaces, individuals feel like, well, if they're thinking about it, then there's nothing I can do about it. Well, you might not be able to, quote unquote, do anything about it, but you might be able to help the person with what they're going through and help them to see things from a different perspective. Help them to know that, suicide does not empty, the worry. It doesn't erase the worry. It just passes that worry and stress on to the folks who are left. So you got to assume that there is something that you can say, some way that you can support that person through what they're going through that will actually cause a very real difference. And if you approach it from that perspective, you're going to be more comfortable with the conversation. Be a good listener. Sometimes you don't have to say too much of anything. It's just being there to listen, to offer support, to let them know that you're there for them and that, if they need you, that you can help them. And sometimes the help, again, might just be as simple as sharing that number that's scrolling at the bottom of the screen, just sharing that suicide hotline number, because there are individuals there who can help 24/7, 365, 366 if it's a leap year. They don't take a day off, and they are trained professionals who can help. The most important one, though, I think, is to cancel your judgment. The last thing that someone needs when they're going through this difficult time is to feel like they're being judged. Statements like, okay, suicide is stupid, and that's the dumbest thing you could possibly do. Those things aren't helpful to someone who's struggling in that moment. You're going to make them feel a lot worse. You're not going to help them to feel better. So assume that, you know, look at it like it was you in that position. It was you feeling like you were at the end of your rope. It's you feeling like you're hopeless. What could you say? What did you need to hear? What gestures would be comforting to you in that time? Try to lean toward those and a little bit less toward some of the judgment. Don't be afraid to speak up. Don't be afraid to ask questions. If you know that something is off with your loved one, or even if it's you and you know that you're not quite feeling yourself, that you're starting to have these thoughts creeping in, even though they might be kind of subtle, and just like I said, you don't feel like you need to be here anymore. You don't feel like anything would change if you didn't wake up in the morning. Reach out for help. Tell someone else how you're feeling. Don't suffer in silence, because that silence is what keeps us sick. Reach out and share the experiences that you're having. Share about the way that you're feeling with a trusted loved one. Because if you think something is off, it just might be. And guess what? If there's nothing wrong, so what? At least that person knows that there's someone who's cared about them enough to check in on them and to be in tune with what's going on with them. So you don't lose anything by checking in, even if nothing's going wrong, right? How many of us, especially now in COVID, wouldn't mind a friendly check-in or two, right? So don't ever keep those thoughts of something's not quite right to yourself. You never know. It could make a major change. But also don't put so much pressure on yourself to believe that you can control the outcome. You want to be able to plant the seeds, but you're not really in control of whether those seeds take root and whether they grow or not. If the person makes the decision to go through with their attempt, it's not your fault. If they don't, it's not your fault. Either way, you just want to be a beacon of light for someone who's in a really dark place. So don't put that much pressure on yourself. It's not healthy. You can be kind. You can be available. You can be a support. You can ask questions. You can give resources, but don't put so much pressure on yourself. And I think perhaps the best thing that we can really do for ourselves and for people that we love is to practice consistent self-care and to encourage the people that we love to do the same. And what that really looks like is making ourselves a priority on our own schedules, making sure that you're eating correctly, making sure you're getting enough sleep, making sure that you're not piling on too many responsibilities, that you're not taking on, as they say, biting off more than you can chew. Know your limits, because when you can take good care of yourself, when you can stay healthy and whole for yourself, one, you're less likely to find yourself in some of these dark spaces, but you're also setting an example for the folks that you love and helping them find the courage to do the same. So, not a whole lot tonight. I just wanted to say, suicide is not a crime. It's something that is a very real issue. It really is a public health crisis, if you ask me, because we're losing so many people to this on a regular basis, and we owe it to ourselves and our community to speak out about everything that is going on and to check in on the folks that we say we love and to make sure that they're okay, but also to take care of ourselves, because that's going to be the best example. So again, if you or someone that you know is having any thoughts of suicide, if you are in any way thinking of harming yourself, if you think that somehow things would be better, I can tell you that the world would definitely not be the same without you in it. And I would encourage you to reach out to the hotline that's scrolling down below, or visit your local emergency room or crisis center for immediate intervention. But know that help is available. There is help and there is hope. So let's check out some of the comments that we have in our chat box. So we have Dr. Yazid is here. Hello, Dr. Yazid. She said that she thinks our society focuses too much on having it all figured out by 18. Oh my goodness. That I think is a major, major, major problem. We at 18, think about what we're legally able to do, right? You can do just about anything. You can vote, you can sign up for war, you can sign documents, you can do all of that kind of stuff at the age of 18. But really, technically speaking, your prefrontal cortex of your brain, which is the part that deals with the logic and the decision making and all of that, the research shows us that that part of your brain isn't even fully developed until you're about 21, 23. So think about that. We're putting all this pressure on these teenagers, and the decision making part of their brain is not even fully formed yet. Think about that. And yet this is the group that is at greatest risk for death by suicide. I think we got to really rethink the way we do some things in our society, because our children are not doing so well. We need to support them a little bit more. Carrion, thank you for the information. Learned a lot. I'm so glad that I could help, that the information was helpful to you. And that's pretty much the goal of this segment. There's a lot that comes across a little bit better in a video format. We try to do a monthly newsletter, and if you're not signed up for the monthly newsletter, I would encourage you to go visit the website. That website is www.awakeningchange.org. If you're not a part of our monthly mailing list, get signed up for that. It'll let you know about all of the stuff that's going on. But having this weekly format allows us to have better dialogue, have richer dialogue in real time about some issues that are going on. So what we'll be doing is we'll be having this session every Thursday night at 9:00 Eastern Standard Time. For those who are in some different time zones, I'm in Eastern, so we'll be doing it 9 p.m. Eastern every Thursday night. And if you have any suggestions for any topics that you'd like for us to discuss or go over, anything that you think you could use some helpful tips around, please feel free to drop us a comment, send us an email. Again, the best way to get in contact with us is www.awakeningchange.org. If you haven't already, like and subscribe the Change Talk YouTube channel so that you can be up to speed on everything that we're doing there. And just be kind to one another. Take care of one another. Check in on folks. This COVID season that we're in is taking a huge, huge toll on our emotional health and our mental health. And it helps to just know that there's someone who's concerned about you, someone who is checking in on you and who cares about how you're doing and how you're feeling. So again, be kind to one another. The number for the suicide prevention hotline is down below. Thank you so much for taking this time out of your schedules to join me, and I'll meet you back here next. We got a comment. Thank you. We will check in with you guys again next week. All right. Stay safe and be well.